You found your way to the Winning Tactics podcast with host Adam Sinkus. Adam discusses winning tactics with small business owners and entrepreneurs, uncovering processes and introducing the tools and solutions for enhancing the bottom line. Thanks again for finding your way to the Winning Tactics podcast, and now your host, Adam Sinkus.
All right. Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is back to that most wonderful day of the week where you get the Winning Tactics podcast. I'm excited today because we are talking about stories and customers and all kinds of great stuff, really driving down how you get more sales, because who doesn't love some more sales? So as always, I appreciate my guests on the show. Mike, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Adam, it's a pleasure to be here. So thanks for having me as one of your guests. Who am I? I'm American born of Eastern European heritage. That's important in just a minute. I've traveled to a bunch of different countries, which has informed a worldview. I speak 4 languages. Right now, I run a company called Storyminers. And one of the things that I find that's really interesting about story is that when you can step into somebody else's shoes, you can see the world more clearly the way they do. And that helps you to connect. But the thing that you can do that really makes a difference is you can see what your business needs to do different and better so that you can serve them. And that's why, being an exchange student and speaking those languages, that's what it really taught me, was how to be an engineer of a business.
Absolutely fantastic. I love it. And story is the ultimate language, right? So at the end of the day, who doesn't love a good story, except maybe when you're in an extreme hurry? But, I've spent a lot of time studying story brand as a philosophy from a marketing perspective. And I've done just a ton of research on how stories play into messaging, and it plays into the whole picture. And it's absolutely wildly fascinating to me why people don't tell more stories, ultimately. And so let's dive into this,
Sure.
And really what it comes down to is, we're trying to sculpt the client experience here, because sales is changing. Sales is definitely changing. It's way different than it was even a year ago. And people, I think, at least in my experience, are way less tolerant to the sales process.
Mm-hmm.
And partially because, the sales process is kind of stale, and it's push my message out about me, and not about my customer. So, where do you start with when you talk about sculpting the client experience? What does that look like?
Well, it's an outside in, then an inside out approach that usually works best. The outside in means you talk to your customers, you talk to your suppliers, you talk to your employees, everybody that you work with, and you see what they need the business to do. What are their issues? What are their needs? Where do they see gaps? What is it that pisses them off, and what elates them? Where do they get value? Then internally, it's when the really hard work starts. Once you've got that information, you have to figure out what to do with it. And there are a lot of folks inside of most companies that are pretty dyed in the wool about the way things have always been. Look, we weren't born yesterday, you young guy. We know what it took to get here, and I want you to appreciate that. And that's when you've got a bit of a challenge ahead of you, because that's exactly what's keeping people stuck right where they are. They have a lot of beliefs about ROI, like return on investment. If we don't know that we're going to make money, we can't invest in that. Well, that's like investing in yesterday. But I don't understand why people carry that forward so much. Yeah, you need ROI, but first you need a really good design. So the answer to your question of how do you sculpt the client experience is you have to know who your customers are intimately. You build avatars around them. You tell stories about them. You have them into your office. You go to their office, their place of work, their homes. You have to understand them as well as they understand themselves. Then you shape your business to deliver more of what they want. that old-fashioned sales thing that you talked about before, that's just bad user interface. People sell that way because their grandfather taught their dad, taught their uncle how to do that. And nobody's buying pots and pans off the back of a horse anymore. You've got to do it in a way that customers want it. So when you're facing that challenge of going from the inside out, you have to craft the experience. And we can go into great detail on that if you want, but you decide how you're going to get your organization to deliver more value for your customers. And you don't just sell more for less. Value doesn't always mean money. It's the other attributes of an experience that clients care about. How much time did you save? Was it frictionless? Did it make me look good? Did it make me feel good? And so on. Sorry for a long answer. I'll try to make the next one a little shorter.
No, I love it. Something that you said really piques my interest, right? And it's about knowing your customer intimately, because I obviously I deal with this in the marketing space quite a bit. And one of the things I always find wildly fascinating is how many people, when you ask them who their ideal client is, they go, well, everybody. Like,
anybody with a wallet, right?
Yeah, I'm like, well, yeah, I'd love to do marketing for everybody in the world, but the reality is that I'm an expert in certain spaces, and I stay in those spaces because I know how to talk to those clients, and I know what those clients need and want, and so like that in itself, I think, is a huge hurdle that people often overlook, is understanding who your ideal client is, who they are, not just from he's a business owner of a retail store, to, really knowing he's a 50-year-old guy that owns a retail store, has a history in working in retail for the last 50 years, has a wife and 2 kids. I mean, like super, super detailed avatars that really help you drive in.
Yeah, and Adam, what you just said is his parents put him to work when he was 1 year old, which is child labor. I don't know if you condone that on your show or not.
Have you ever worked in a family business?
I think you're right. You win that point. Hey, let's double click on that for just a second. Why is that advice so prevalent right now? Why is it that you need to know your customer so well? It's one thing to say it. It's another to understand why, so you can make it your own. So there are a couple things going there. The first one is no business can be designed to serve the needs of everyone. Not even Amazon can serve everyone. UPS will ship an elephant. Amazon will not. They know their limitations. A lot of clothing brands specialize in clothes that you can fold, that don't go on hangers, that don't need to be folded. T-shirts, scarves, leggings, bathing suits, stuff like that. Others focus on wedding dresses and things that require tons of care. The logistics for those are so different. The way you buy them by the gross for t-shirts or by the unit for wedding dresses is different. So by picking the right client to design your business around, your business becomes optimized for that client, and you get closer to being best at what they want most. It doesn't mean that you can't sell the wedding dress to somebody that shouldn't, to a construction worker, for example. You can still make the transaction, but that's not going to make your brand. So those are the reasons why it's so important, because you're designing your business around the needs of your customer. And that once that relationship's made, it's really hard to change it. And that's a good thing, because a lot of people kind of waste their customers and waste all their sales effort, and they go hunting for somebody new next time. But once you lock in on the right kind of customer, word of mouth spreads, and you just become better and better at that niche.
Yeah, I love what you said there, and you used the word very intentionally. It's about what they need, because so many businesses are going into it with the mindset of, how do I solve a problem, right? But a problem is one thing, the problem is another thing, and so like when you approach it and you step back and you go, what is their problem? How do I solve their problem? It becomes ultimately just so much more powerful from a conversation perspective. And then you tied that in right into relationships, which is like, relationship selling is in my mind the only way you should be selling. I always go back to, people buy from the people that they know, like, and trust, and that doesn't happen if you don't have some sort of relationship with them.
That's true. And I think that since the topic of this is, shaping client experience, that the experience that you provide for them is part of making that relationship. And it's not just the personal part. It shows that you're committed. It shows that you've invested in getting to know them before they even know who you are, that you've provided information on your website or through your other channels that makes it easier for them to understand if you're a good fit or not. Showing up on time, answering the right questions, providing the online support, using your phone to take questions or to let them show what's wrong with their water heater and all that kind of stuff. All those things are part of the experience, and they don't happen by accident. It's like movies don't happen by accident. Each scene is carefully laid out and scripted and lit and filmed and all of that. And it's really an art. And I think that the folks who put more heart into their art and that design more and don't just do whatever's most expedient or looks good on a spreadsheet are the ones that win.
I watched this video one time, and it's, especially in our modern era, this makes so much sense. It was about a car salesman for a Chrysler dealership. She was wildly successful, and they couldn't figure out why. So they did some research on what she was doing and just started really focusing in on what she was doing. And she started almost every interaction with a new customer with, "I hope you don't mind, but I took a few minutes to look at your Facebook or your LinkedIn profile to learn a little bit about you." And it was that's how she started the interaction. When she had a scheduled appointment with a new customer, right? And it totally changes. I think of it from the customer's perspective, it totally starts to change. She went the extra mile to make sure she knew who I was and what I was about.
Yeah, she was doing things for her customers, not to them. And our salespeople are notorious for that.
Yes, my son is in the process of buying a car right now, and we had one of those unfortunate to you. We told him, we were there at the end of the night and told him, you know what, we really need to think about this. We weren't prepared to buy. We were just first time out really shopping around. And he's like, I'm like, "We will call you tomorrow." Well, guess what happened at 9:15 a.m. the next day?
He called you.
He called us.
Wow.
2:30, totally understand that one. 9:15, he hadn't even given us a chance to make a phone call.
He should have sent you a Starbucks via Grubhub with a little message. That would have been better. If it was that
For sure. For sure. DoorDash, Grubhub, all that stuff, it makes such an awesome potential experience. Especially in our remote world, it's a way we can, we can really attack I shouldn't say attack, that's the wrong word, but really approach, going above and beyond for our customers. So
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So, the other thing that's really interesting, that we talked about in the pre-show is a little bit about just how we approach really engineering outcomes for our customers, not going into it with this notion of, here's my product and I'm going to cram this product, no matter how it fits in their box, down their throat until they buy it, but really engineering outcomes that are geared towards them. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, when I hear the phrase engineering outcomes, I think of two things. The first one is, I'm going to tell the client what they need, or I'm going to tell the client what I need them to know so they'll do what I want. There's manipulation there. And manipulation is not part of relationship selling. It's not part of anybody's ethics. It's just not, it's not good business practice, in my opinion. Even if your job is to sell more of something, doing it in a manipulative way harms the brand, doesn't fulfill the full needs of the clients. So thinking about outcomes means figuring out what the customer's job to be done is. What job are they hiring you to help them do? Whether you're if you're buying a car, you need transportation, you need a hot ride, you need your kids to be able to go to daycare, you need to go get groceries, you need grandma to make it to the doctors. Whatever your needs are, you're buying the car for its transportation purposes or for your status purposes. you need as a salesperson or as a customer experience designer to really lock in on what those outcomes are that customers care about, because that's how you create value for them. The folks who are doing manipulation are trying to get their value first, and that's the wrong order to do things in. If you can't understand what the customer's trying to do, how can you serve them? If you do understand what they're trying to do, maybe your product or service can help them get it done better, faster, cheaper, or more comfortably, or with a sense of an heirloom value or heritage, or maybe it makes them feel good in a different way. All of those count as ways to deliver value. So first, you create value for your client, and then you take some for yourself. That's what engineering outcomes is all about.
I love that. I think it's so interesting because so often I see people sales trying to fit into that box and push their product to fit in a space that maybe it doesn't necessarily fit in.
Yeah.
And instead I'm like, I'm willing to give up a deal because I'm not an expert in that space.
Mm-hmm.
If I can pass it to somebody that I know is an expert in that space to help them down the road, because at the end of the day, now I've created this social currency with them. I've built a relationship. I've built trust with them. I've sent them to somebody that I know is going to do a better job than myself on whatever that thing is. And when they're ready for my thing, where do you think they're coming?
Yeah, and your friends are going to send you their leads that they're not the best for. Hopefully you're working with that caliber of person. That's the trick.
Yes, of course. It is a two-way street with that, and that is the power of building, in my opinion, a successful network. Because not only do you get referral business, but it's oftentimes where your customers come from. It's where your customers go to tell the rest of the world about their experience with you, good, bad, or indifferent, right? They're gonna shout it out to the world. So I think that's absolutely important. We're gonna take just a brief pause so I can go ahead and thank my affiliate partner, Cowork Hub Virtual. Really, really cool virtual office platform, really geared towards consultants, freelancers, coaches, solopreneurs, those that really have spent time in a physical co-working space. This is that same feeling in a virtual space. You get a custom office, mention you heard it on the Winning Tactics, and you can get a free custom branded office, which is a $50 additional value. Super, super cool platform. Really gives you an opportunity to get back to water cooler chat and really build a community with other freelancers and coaches and consultants. So check them out at coworkhubvirtual.com. And as always, we thank them for their affiliate partnership. So, and now back to the important stuff. We've been talking a lot about, sculpting that experience and some of the theory behind it, but I always like to really push it into, how do people apply this? So what does it look like? How do we start sculpting that experience from an application standpoint?
When you mean application, do you mean how it's used, or do you mean software program?
Like how we do it.
Right.
How we do it. How we do it.
Let's work with a real example so we can use a lot of nouns and adjectives that fit. Give me a scenario.
Yeah. So like I am selling.
How about Cowork Hub Virtual?
Yeah, there we go. I'm selling Cowork Hub Virtual, and so I want to start to sculpt that experience with with these consultants and freelancers and coaches. So let's start walking through the process, because obviously I think most of us are pretty familiar with at least opening up a conversation with somebody. Sure. I think most people have been to a networking event. So once we open up the conversation, how do we start to really dive into building that relationship and then working into fitting in their needs into our product?
Okay. And what role am I going to play in this? Am I a designer, like an experienced designer who's helping that brand figure out how they want to go to market? Am I a salesperson? Yeah. Okay.
Salesperson. Let's do it from a sales perspective. So I think we got a lot of small businesses. They tend to be more on the sales end of things. So
right.
So let's hit it up in sales.
So just like your car dealer, I would look them up online, look them up on social. I try to get a feel for what that experience is like. And I would develop a point of view before I went to speak with them. So my point of view just made up right now may or may not be good, but we'll use it for example. I think that people who might be interested in a virtual working scenario where you can bump into people at the water cooler, where you might get somebody to answer your phone and a bunch of other things like you could kind of get in a physical office, they're going to imagine what's their day going to be like with the service and on their own. Those are their two options. Or they could go to a WeWork, but they went out of business. No, they didn't. They're just about to IPO, as a matter of fact, again.
Yep.
So you figure out what's a day like for them, and then you work the day backwards. Working backwards is a really fun way to do design work. So they're already back home from a long day at the office or a long day at their desk in their home, and they're in kind of cool down mode, and they're talking to their friends, or they're on social media. What are they talking about? They're on Twitch talking to a buddy while they're gaming, and they're saying, today this is what happened, blah, blah, blah. What's a fulfilling day for them? What leaves them feeling renewed, relieved, inspired, steeled for the next day? You have to look at how people want to feel. And that's a perspective that most people don't know about. It's magic when it comes to design. Architects use it, musicians use it, plastic surgeons use it. Everybody knows to engineer an experience or to sculpt one for certain emotional outcomes, because that's what attracts us. That's also what we as customers remember. So we're working backwards from the end of the day, those conversations where you're shouting out to your friends how cool it was. Well, what are 2 or 3 high points in that day? So if I'm selling coworkhubvirtual.com, I need to know the product pretty well. So I need to know that there is a free virtual backdrop that I can download. So instead of a gray screen, I can have one that's got, pink ponies or people moving slowly in the background or martini glasses or whatever it is. I need to know what that is so I can drop that as a clue in my conversation. That might come across as something like, hey, Fred, wouldn't it be cool if instead of seeing your dog, kind of tearing down the curtains behind you, if it looked like you were at a really cool place, and what if you had 2 or 3 angles that were from the same place, so it didn't look like it was a backdrop all the time? Well, that would be pretty cool. How would that make you look? How would that make you feel? How comfortable would that make you when you're talking to brand new prospects? Another thing, I'm imagining that during the day I get busy and somebody calls me on my phone, and I've got one phone and I'm on it, and somebody else dials in, and I share that, like, this person's more important than you are look on my face, and they read it and they go, oh my God, that's terrible. So you've got to have somebody pick up that call. So I just push a button, and the folks at my new office will take my call for me. Well, that means I don't miss a call, that people feel like they're being well taken care of. It feels professional. Now I've got 2 things that I can share with somebody to open up the conversation. Third thing you can do is go back to the very beginning of the day. How do you feel when you're going to work? What are you looking forward to most? What are you dreading? That's just like looking at somebody's social media profile. Find out a little bit about them, what makes them tick, how they feel, how they want to feel, what mission are they on, what are they trying to accomplish for themselves, their business, and for their clients. And once you know that, you can start to shape an experience just for them based on all the attributes that your service has. How's that?
I love that. I absolutely love that. It's absolutely an amazing approach to it. It's a very practical approach, but the one thing that kept coming out of your mouth that I love was the word feel, because it's such an important part. Emotion is such an important part of sales. It's an important part of everything we do in business. And a great example of where emotion will always win is when you have a bad experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a bad experience, you upset because your food came out cold, your service was slow at the restaurant, and it was your anniversary, and you're trying to make this special night out of it, and it was just awful, right? And what are you going to do? You're frustrated. You're going to come home and you're going to hit Google reviews hard. You're going to hit Facebook hard, tell all your friends and everybody don't go to this place. They were terrible, right? But on the same token, if you can elicit that same powerful emotion on the other side of the spectrum, the extremely happy, they met me where I needed to be, and they took care of me, and they made me feel included and part of, in really created create an experience that is above and beyond expectation. And I think that's the important part there. It has to be above and beyond expectation.
Ooh, I disagree strongly.
Okay.
All right. And then we're going to go to a really dark place.
Okay.
If you always exceed customers' expectations, you're guaranteed to go out of business. You can't do that. Your business cannot afford it. When you go to a great restaurant and you just love the flavor of that hand-rubbed seasoning that goes on the steak, and it's done on this grill at 542.5 degrees, you want that experience again and again and again. That's what you want. You don't want them to burn the steak. You don't want them to cook it at 700 degrees is more better. You don't want them to put like fancy flowers on it. That's not what you want. You want the steak that you love. The company needs to be consistent in quality and varied in the experience of delivery. So always wowing people by giving them more will put you out of business. Let's go to a really dark place for a minute, as promised. Let's imagine, and I hope nobody's going through this, but you have a dear friend or relative who's needs to go to a cancer center because they're not terminal, but their local physicians can't take it. They've got to go to a specialty hospital where they deal with this special condition all the time. If you were designing that hospital experience, knowing that you're going to get all kinds of outcomes from all kinds of people in this special niche of toenail cancer, whatever it is, something special, how would you design that experience? What would you want people to feel?
First thing, I want them to feel welcome. I want them to feel like, well, they're there in our care, that like as close to home as they can get, because they're comfortable. I want them to, regardless of the circumstances, to be happy to see like the staff and, and happy that they're being taken care of well. And obviously I think, the outcome of being able to treat or cure the disease is important as well.
You got a 50% grade on that. Welcome, perfect. At home, definitely doable. Happy, you can't manipulate. You can't make customers do something. You can't guarantee that they will be happy, and there's no way that you can guarantee that they'll be cured. So a lot of hospitals organize their messaging around that, and they talk about their percentage of survivors or their cure rates. In the medical trade, they talk about kill rates. It's really disgusting, but it really focuses in on how efficient different doctors are, different techniques or combinations of anesthetists and surgeons. They actually measure all that stuff. But what you could do with somebody who's got cancer, knowing that you don't know what their outcome is going to be, is you could help them to feel renewed, or even better, revitalized. Because maybe they're not going to come back to where they were before, but they're going to definitely feel better than where they were. And their condition might not even change. It might even be worse. But if they have that feeling of renewed, they've got the strength to go at it one more day, to sit in that chemo chair one more time, and to deal with the pinpricks and the waking up and the temperatures and all of that. So you've got to make sure that the emotion that you're designing for is really what your organization can deliver, and it's what your customer, and in this case, the caregivers and family members, will really appreciate the most. And this example is not one that I came up with. A colleague named Lou Carbone did this work for a Cleveland clinic years ago, and it's one of my favorite case studies because it does talk about how we tend to just put the notion of we'll fix it for you on top of everything, and that's not always the realistic solution. So I hope this example helps people to come up with their own ideas.
No, I absolutely love that example. And we are getting towards the end of time. So I always like to end my show with final thoughts. It's that one thing that, regardless of everything else they've heard on the show, that they can walk away and do something with based on our conversation today. So I leave the floor to you for your final thought.
First of all, thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure. Great questions. No matter how hard you try or how much you spend, your brand can't be any better than what your customers experience.
I love those sentiments. Simple, but so true. So appreciate your time. I appreciate your knowledge as well. You definitely gave us some really great tips and tricks that I think, I know I'll be putting into place some of this stuff in my own businesses. So
it's a two-way street. I learned too. So thank you very much.
So I appreciate that. As always, I appreciate everybody that hopped on the live show to listen. And if you're catching the replay, we appreciate you as well. Don't forget to come visit us every Tuesday on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitch. And every Thursday, you can find our new episode of our show on YouTube and all the major podcast channels. Thank you so much for your time, and you all have a wonderful rest of your week.
Well, that wraps up yet another episode of the Winning Tactics Podcast. You can find Adam on both the LinkedIn and Facebook platforms. And to support the show and ensure the success of the podcast, would you kindly consider visiting Patreon.com/Adam Sinkus? We greatly appreciate it. And until next time, from the Winning Tactics Podcast, remember, culture is how your team behaves when no one is looking. Take good care, and thanks for listening.